And hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Conversations of Agile Change. This week, I am very delighted to be bringing to you one of our Agile All Stars, I will describe her as, of the Agile Change Leadership Institute, the rather fabulous Elizabeth Beattie. She is a lifelong learner, has been through, I think, pretty much every one of our courses from the beginning, and is so very generous in continuously sharing what she is learning and how she is integrating it. And we caught up recently, and Elizabeth now has what many would consider the dream role in that she is the program change lead for AI and innovation at the University of New South Wales, UNSW. Now,
Mhm.
for our American listeners, UNSW is one of the group of eight. Group of eight, think brownstones, think Ivy League. So it's the big leagues Elizabeth is working in, and she's doing some amazing stuff. So I really wanted to hear more about it and share that with you. Elizabeth, welcome to Conversations of Agile Change.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. This is a long-awaited conversation that we've been talking about for about 6 months. So
Yes, yes.
thanks for having me.
Look, sometimes it doesn't happen fast, right? You know, things happen, but it does happen. I think there's a hair ad about that. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen, or something like that.
It's given me more time to plan, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, because we are going to be talking about AI. I'm quite sure that had we had a conversation 6 months ago, it would have been very different to the conversation we're having today. So there may be a reason. Okay, let's start with working at a university, doing change at a university. This is not your first rodeo. I'm going to upset our American listeners, North American listeners, with my rodeo pronunciation. All that to say, you've done this before. This is not your first university you've worked in. Can you tell us a little
Correct.
bit about what the higher education sector is like as a change environment? What's it like to do change in that space?
Sure. Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is that it's very collaborative. So there's lots of stakeholder engagement from top to bottom, whatever the change is. And that's been really helpful for me because I've been able to lean into that. And I think it's fair to say that it is critical that we engage and work together on how we implement AI.
Mhm.
So our program has taken a really broad lens on engagement, and we've established an AI ecosystem, which includes 5 working groups across the university. We've also established various communities of practice and an advice panel that innovators can come to for support. So what we've done is we've engaged on all elements of the program in those groups. So our vision and roadmap, capability uplift, technology, data, governance, and reporting, which has been, a really great way to work.
Mm. That's quite straight away off the bat. That's a lot different to the way a lot of change programs work, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you've really gone in, hit the ground running in terms of collaborative co-creation. Oh, I'm almost seeing like, concentric circles in terms of.
Exactly. And it's almost expected. And it doesn't mean you necessarily need to use that human-centered approach. But obviously I like to, so it works for me. But yeah, it makes it very easy. I mean, another interesting thing about higher ed is that we have AI, and maybe this is not unique, but we have AI and innovation embedded into our strategy, which gives us a very strong remit. So we've come out and stated in our strategy that we wish to provide students with future-focused skills and knowledge to achieve their aspirations within their lives, careers, and impact. But our new strategy is entitled Progress for All, which means we're looking for societal impact.
Mhm.
So the focus is slightly different potentially to some sectors.
Mm.
So, not only are we looking at things like technology and research, but, advancing medical treatments, Indigenous self-determination, human rights, inclusion, social justice, etc. So we're using that lens with respect to our program.
So really aligning that university strategy with the change agenda there.
Exactly.
purpose, centering on purpose. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, we're also surrounded by leading edge research and innovation.
Mm, mm,
And so, what we've done in the program is to try and really foster innovation rather than
mhm,
manage it or
mhm,
control it,
mhm.
because there's so many pockets of it everywhere. And so, what we want to do is to support and enable that and grow it.
Mm.
So, we've tried to create a lot of environments where people can experiment, lean into that technology in a safe way through
Yep.
sandboxes, proof of concepts, etc., and bringing that coalition of the willing along to really sort of lead the way, test, learn, and share.
And do so academics who are researchers, right? So again, UNSW is research intensive.
Mm-hmm.
And do they does that audience necessarily make the link between the work they do? I'm a researcher, I am using scientific inquiry into how I solve problems to the change space? Or do they have different expectations of change? Because I look at it and I go, well, change is scientific inquiry, it is research, it
Mm.
is.
I think I'm not maybe not all of them, but the ones,
Mm,
because we're at the moment working with those early adopters, they
mm,
certainly do,
mm,
absolutely. And I'll talk about the communities that we've created in a little while, but they've
yeah.
really embraced that, which has been great for us.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Um,
So, uh,
so can I just make
yeah.
one more point?
Mm,
Another really interesting thing about higher education is that we're very transparent and open about what we
mm,
do. So we share learnings and insights with our colleague universities,
yep.
and so we are trying to pave the way in terms of the sector, but we're
Mm.
also working with others who are doing the same and learning from each other, which it's a really nice way to operate.
That's really unique because you don't
Yes.
necessarily get that if you're working in the financial sector or fast moving consumer goods. There's not that ecosystem of learning from competitors, as
From
it
each
were.
other. Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So,
Interesting. Interesting. So, paint me a picture of what a day in the life of Elizabeth Beattie looks like.
well, we are working in agile sprints.
Hmm.
So that does create a little bit of complexity because I'm working across multiple streams.
Hmm.
But it's actually new for our team. So we're sort of trying to explore that new territory and role model. So we've got 4 streams in our AI program, and then I'm also in the innovation program. There's a couple there. So we're involved in everything. The change team, because there's so much going on, and the reason I mention that is it because it's a great opportunity to experiment with new ways of working. So specifically I'm talking AI here.
Yeah.
So we're creating playbooks, we're trying to experiment with agents and other efficiencies to really streamline our work, so it's provided a really great opportunity. In terms of my work, I've got 4 objectives over the next 6 months. So one of them is the capability lead for innovation. And so what I'm doing is designing training programs and curriculums on human-centered design and AI. That's sort of an IT specific thing. And I'm trying to learn about the intersection between the two, which is quite interesting. Looking at developing an approach to measure and uplift AI capability university-wide.
Mhm.
And so again, we're leaning into that continuous engagement and community building. I worked on our co-pilot rollout, and so now we're planning a scaled rollout approach as part of our business case. So, we're not sure of the parameters yet, but we do have 7,500 staff approximately. So
Yeah.
that would have to be certainly a scaled rollout approach. So that's taking a bit of a challenge for me. And then finally, we're really doubling down on comms and engagement because it's the second year of our program now, and we need to just make sure that we are being a little bit more sophisticated with respect to how we're communicating, getting that broader reach, so that we're not just, I guess, engaging with those who want to engage with us, but we want to go a lot broader.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's a nice mix between the strategic and the operational.
Yeah.
Good opportunity to use agile and human-centered approaches, obviously AI,
Yeah.
huge learning component.
Yeah.
The brain strain is intense because, things change regularly and I need to keep up to speed with that. But, that's something that I enjoy.
Yeah. Oh, you're well suited to it, so that I'm quite sure. Now, here's something, and we've touched on this on our former conversations, and it's one that's still playing out in conversations I'm having with other people, um, which is a version of what's the big deal about AI. Um, is the and so let me just play out what's in my head. I think there's two elements. One, how do we as change practitioners use AI in our change work? But the
Mhm.
second one is how do we introduce AI so that the programs that you're doing. Um, and so the question that I've kind of been playing around with is how is AI any different to any other technology or ways of working that we've introduced before? Like, are we getting all hyped up about it when actually it's just another form of technology change? Um, so I am super curious to hear your take on that.
So I don't think it is just a technology change. And I think it does probably, I mean, it depends from a change practitioner what sort of background you have. But I think it is a ways of working transformation. And so you're looking at people, process, technology, mindset shifts, etc. And I think you can use those similar approaches to whether you're doing an operating model change, an agile transformation, or innovation more generally. So I think from that perspective, it's very similar. I mean, I came into this program with no experience at all with AI.
Yeah.
So, but I had experience in some of those in ways of working
Mhm.
changes. I think, I mean, it is always changing. So you
Mhm.
do need a flexible and iterative approach. And um, you can't design the deliverable up front because of the fact that the technology is changing and your environment is changing. So you need to do POCs and pilots, etc. And so from that perspective, I think again, you can use similar approaches in terms of human-centric change, etc. Um, Everyone is at different stages, and so we need to align what we're doing to where our users are at. And so you've always got that continuous improvement, constant iterating approach. So for me, I think it is very similar to, it's not just technology, but I think it's very similar to some of the other changes that we've gone through previously.
Is there, so devil's advocate now to what my thinking is, and then now playing back what you've just said, is there something that's inherently scarier about AI that increases the fear factor for the recipient of change? Or do you think that your your people are just rolling with it?
Oh, there's definitely a fear factor.
Mm,
And so that's where that mindset shift comes in.
yeah.
And also the importance of leadership sponsorship also comes in.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people don't understand it,
Mm,
and both, how to use it safely, but also what it might mean for them. And
mm,
so there's a huge education component, which is again, I've always sort of worked on capability style changes, and I
mm,
think, and we're taking a capability led approach. So I think that is critical so that people can understand it and go through those various stages of making that mindset shift, which, going back to more traditional change approaches, you've got the awareness and then you've got the desire.
yeah.
That is important.
Yes.
And then learning how to cope with it and how to, traverse
Yeah.
that journey.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to pick up on you just shared that you're taking a capability led approach. Can you tell us
Mhm.
what that means? What does that mean for you?
Um, so as I said before, one of the objectives in it, we've got sort of four objectives in our program. One of them is capability building.
Hmm.
And so what we are trying to do is to really uplift capability um, in AI across the whole of the university. And so I'm kind of using change techniques to do that. So We're using the 70-20-10 model, which
Mhm.
is 10% learning, 20% peer-based learning, and then 70% experimentation. And so we are offering, training on specific tools, but also more generally.
Mhm.
But what we're trying to do is to really get people to test these tools and experiment and learn on the job. Um,
Mm.
so I guess from a change perspective, I've been, as I said, using some of these change tools to really do that. So and obviously they're agile change tools.
Yeah.
So to give you an example, we've used the Future Changescape, which has been around goal setting, inspiration for learning, etc. We're collecting data on everything. So
Yeah.
the tools that we're using, our rollout approach, use cases, time saved, etc. We're doing that through pulse checks, surveys, retros. We've got communities of practice that meet regularly. And basically what we're trying to do is to get the community to help each other, because we're not
Yes.
experts. It's the
Yes.
community who are experts. So we've done a lot of working out
Yeah.
loud, co-creation. For example, we've created a capability framework. We've co-created training courses. Also, I got my community to help me create the pilot and the rollout approach for various
Amazing.
tools. Yeah, yeah. It's
Amazing.
been it's been quite exciting from that perspective.
Can I dive into that one just a little bit?
Yep.
Um, so one of the pushbacks that we often get on that concept is that it's really time intensive. You can't do it quickly. So as a change lead, I could walk in and I can tell you, here's your change approach. But the minute we start co-creating it, that's going to take days. What was your experience of co-creating that change approach with your communities of practice?
Well, the thing is that I'm not an expert.
Mm.
So yes, you could say it does take a long time, but you're not doing it just one step, doing other things. So they're learning, they're sharing, and then you're taking feedback. And I, in some cases, I didn't even plan to co-create it, but I kept getting all this valuable feedback, and it's like, well, you're going to be my champions. Then how about you design a change approach and tell me what worked for you?
Yes.
So yeah, it is time intensive, and this is one of the challenges that I
Mm.
haven't yet worked out in terms of scaling. It is time intensive, but no one's an expert at this sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think really it's the only way.
Interesting. Interesting. So, as part of your role, you have innovation attached to AI and innovation, like as an enablement lead. So, I'm kind
Mhm.
of curious again, what's the intersection of innovation and agile change? Do they work nicely together or do they butt heads a bit? Or what's been your experience of that?
I mean, I think they work nicely together. So having those two things in my role is a gift for me. I mean, I first learnt about human-centered and agile change in an innovation
Yep.
transformation, which is probably 6, 7 years ago.
Yep.
And I learned about design thinking, and then I linked it to change management. It was actually via a seminar that Lena Ross gave.
Yeah.
So she kind of provided that linkage for me. So I think, for me, it's great as a change practitioner. Every day I have the opportunity to be continuously learning, experimenting, supporting that mindset shift using a human-centered approach. So, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, and I personally can't see any other way to do it. But
So
that's
I
just me.
yeah, so what I'm hearing from that is really the alignment of the agile mindset with innovation, that um appreciating failure as part of the process and giving things a go and um
Absolutely. And
that
they're not exactly the same, and we've talked about this
yeah.
before because I've tried to work out there are differences between the innovation and the agile mindset, but I think that probably maybe 70-80% of it is similar in terms of the
Yeah.
failure, experimentation, curiosity,
Yeah.
and some of those other concepts. it's
Mm,
it's very, very similar. And
yeah, nice.
customer centricity is a key part of innovation, obviously,
Mm, mm,
and also and agile. And, I think for me that human-centered design is probably the linchpin from an innovation methodology. I mean, there's many, but I think that, the key one that I use, it would be human-centered design.
Mm. You've mentioned a couple of times that nobody's the expert in this space, which really, again, if we think about agile mindset, and we talk about the shift from expert mindset to beginner mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm curious what your experience has been embodying that beginner's mindset, particularly, I'm mindful of how vulnerable you can feel. You are the
Mm-hmm.
change lead, you're going in and saying nobody's expert and so how have you navigated your personal feelings of vulnerability with this space of not being the expert, of having people in your communities knowing much more? What's that
Mm.
been like?
Well, it's interesting because we do have a bit of an expert culture.
Mm,
I'm talking higher ed generally because,
yeah.
you're surrounded by experts. And so I think, coming back to the point I made about being collaborative and leaning into your stakeholders, that's been, really important. But it's a cultural shift for some.
Mm,
For me, I've always had vulnerability.
mm,
I've always embraced different techniques, like reverse mentoring and other ways to learn from others. Um, my role as a change lead is not to be an expert, and I never was in terms of AI. Certainly not now. But what I'm trying to do is to facilitate and create that environment where people can learn. So I
mm,
think, as a leader of a community of practice, if you're not an expert, then you can create that psychological safety.
mhm.
And if I can be open about my own capabilities or lack of and failures, I think that you can encourage others to do the same and join them on that journey.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. I think so. It reminds me of the recent shift um, from when I went to agile and human-centered approach, and I went back to beginner. And I had to embrace experimentation, etc. And at that point, there was a bit of a catalyst event, which was COVID.
Mm,
So forced to think differently. I think for me in this role, I've sort of found a bit of a catalyst event, which was I used to have a large team, but now I've gone back to delivery and I'm in a much smaller team. So I do
mm.
need to think creatively about how to get things done. And I've used AI to do that, which has kind of forced me to really experiment and leverage the technology, which I probably wouldn't normally do. Um,
Oh, I'm so pleased that you mentioned that, because I mentioned that earlier and then I forgot to pick up on that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've used AI in your change practice? What does that look like? And I think you mentioned agents before, and
yeah, well, it is, to be fair, I'm still learning and time
yep.
is a challenge. So, obviously, relying on data is a big thing.
Mhm.
So I kind of use it as a bit of an analyst, create agents is probably might be a little bit more too sophisticated. That's probably the wrong word, but use the tool to help analyze all the data that we've been collecting.
Mhm.
Also, in terms of synthesizing and extracting, as I said, I've had to do a lot of learning,
Mm.
and whilst I prefer to read all the articles I can myself, getting then after I've read them, getting AI to help synthesize and draw out the key points.
Yeah.
It's also helped with, creativity.
Mm.
So, for example, it can, in terms of your research, if you're planning a training course or whatever, it can certainly help you, but also it can help you do things that you wouldn't necessarily do. So I think it was maybe a month ago, I went to the Change Leader breakfast that you spoke at,
Yep.
also with Greg Taylor from Salesforce. And he talked about, he shared a podcast tool. And
That's
so
right.
it kind of inspired me to go away and experiment with that. And I had to present a learner persona, so somebody learning about AI. And I got this podcast tool to create a podcast about what I was trying to present, and use that to present the tool rather than just to show a persona. And it was something different. So it caught
Yeah,
people's attention. I felt good because I tried something new and it wasn't a failure. I mean,
yeah,
didn't matter if it was, but so I
yeah,
think it's kind of forced you to do different things. And I mean, I'm lucky I've got access to lots of tools, but
yeah.
I have to try and build time every day to use them. And if I'm really struggling with something, I say, right, okay, how can AI help me with this? How can it help
Mm,
me be faster, more creative, etc.? So,
mm,
I mean, it's interesting. When I did the ACLI certificate, I
yeah.
discovered I wasn't naturally curious. And so I've forced myself to become curious by building it into my everyday. And I've had to do the
Mm,
same with AI because it's not my natural tendency to use it.
mm,
So it's like I'm always looking for a way to use it and then
yeah,
sharing it with others. And it's often my peer group, so the people who I'm facilitating who prompt me to do something, which is
yeah,
nice.
yeah,
It's again
yes.
that reverse mentoring.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to reassure you, pretty much a high proportion of the people who do the Agile Change Leadership Certificate, that module on curiosity, often shocks them, and everybody realizes actually we're not that curious, or not in the sense of curiosity for curiosity's sake. Um,
Yes, correct.
we're all pretty good at being curious for problem solving, but not for just wondering, you know, and playing with curiosity and the creative side of curiosity that you've just given us fabulous examples of. I love it. Um, okay, based on what your experience has been, top three agile change tools, which would be the three that you couldn't live without?
Oh, good question. Probably personas is one.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do these straight away, but I needed to understand a community, and so I ran some workshops. And I mean, it's a great opportunity to generate engagement, to gather data. And I'm actually just about to start it again because I've realized in my capability approach, we need to create personas of the different levels of learners, not the different groups, but the different
Yeah.
levels of learners, which will help drive our approach. Interestingly, and this was a surprise, lean coffee has been my absolute game changer. So
Yeah.
I actually used it in my community. So we had small communities of practice, but we sort of had as part of our pilot a large community, and people could just come along if they wanted to. And so I used lean coffee as the agenda, which is genderless, get them to drive it.
Yeah.
And people just embraced it. Like we were getting like 40 to 50 people coming along.
Amazing.
Initially, it was like troubleshooting and questions, and then people would start showcasing their tools, and I might
Yeah.
prompt people behind the scenes to do little presentations.
Yeah.
And often only 5 or 10 people would speak, but
Yeah.
it was those really enthusiastic people. And then if people missed it, they'd go and watch the recording,
Yeah.
which amazed me because it's like a conversation.
Yeah.
And so I was always surprised that people would
Yeah.
want to say, "Well, you didn't record it this week. What's happening?" I don't know what my third tool is. You've got me on the fly here.
Yeah.
Probably, I mean, just in terms of that reflection, I have used retros,
Yeah.
um, and it's sort of retros of what we've done. So again, with the
Mm,
community, like we did a retro of our pilot,
mm,
and then we use that to drive, as I said, the rollout approach, and that's where that co-creation came in. And I wasn't planning on doing the co-creation, but I was getting so much valuable feedback.
yeah.
It's much better than a survey, like I did it face to face.
Mm,
Using an online whiteboard. People really sort of, again, it's an engagement opportunity, it's data gathering. Certainly, it's those two of the ACLI change capabilities. I've really leaned into the data informed decision making and the continuous
yeah.
engagement. And hence why I'm trying to push myself to do some of the bit more communication and do things a little
Mm,
bit more creative, and push that curiosity into the direction, which is probably something I'm not as strong at.
yeah. No, that's great. That is excellent. Okay. You run into a leader of an organization. Here's who they hear what you're doing, and they say, we're
Mhm.
just about to embark on an AI transformation of the organization. What's your advice to that leader?
Oh, Well, that's a good question. I mean, as we spoke before, fear is an inherent threat for many.
Mhm.
And I think it's a leader's role to alleviate that uncertainty by really fostering trust, transparent communication, and around how they're doing it, but also what the purpose and the expectations are for AI implementation. So I think the best way that leaders can do that is by experimenting and leading the way to becoming practitioners. And so what I mean by that is literally role modeling and being transparent about their
Yeah.
struggles. So, for example, we had some senior leaders on our early pilots, and they came along to our community sessions and said that they were struggling with the tool and struggling
Yeah.
with the mindset shift. And it was so powerful for the other people in the room because then they could also say, well, we're struggling too.
Yeah.
And
It was
so,
safe.
exactly. So it's about, being patient, giving people are all at different levels. So give your teams that time and space to shift the way that they work, but also be transparent about it. So, in your team meetings or communities or online, share the challenges and how you solve them and lean on each other.
Nice, nice. What about your advice for fellow change practitioners as they step
Ah,
into more and more work of this nature?
um, don't be afraid. I would definitely recommend using a human-centered approach
Mhm.
because it's very individual. I think, we've talked about this. You need to be curious and role model and experiment.
Mhm.
Um, so, there's lots of use cases, and I think you actually sort of need to get into the weeds, not to become an expert, but to so that you can have that empathy, maybe with your human, with your users. Um, and then I would certainly recommend having, high levels of engagement. So,
Yeah.
because that's where you get that richness from the other members of the group, that you can
Yeah.
really sort of, push that learning along.
Perfect. Perfect. Um, Elizabeth, this has been such a rich conversation. Thank you so much. Now, we have got a special treat coming up for fellow alumni. So, anybody who has been through our Certificate of Agile Change Leadership or Agile Change Management, you are going to host a co creation session on how to create a change management approach for AI. Is this correct?
Yes, I am.
And
Very exciting.
it is, we're going to do that May the 23rd in the morning. So that will be the 22nd. Have I got the date right?
Yes, yes, it's
Yeah.
Friday morning.
Yeah. Friday morning in Australia. It'll be Thursday afternoon, evening in North America. Um, can you give us a bit of a preview? What's on your mind? What does co-creation of a change approach for AI look like? And I think, have we got 90 minutes or 2 hours? What have we?
I think
90
it's
minutes?
90 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you, I
Yeah.
haven't yet worked out what I'm planning to do. But and I'll be keen anyone who wants to come along for everyone to bring their challenges.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started, I had some fairly early deliverables, so I went straight out. Probably no surprise based on our conversation, and started collecting data and
Yeah.
engaging. Um, Used a minimum viable change process to drive my work, so chunking down the change. And then,
Yeah.
because I was new to the organization and still learning, that was a great way to, gather insights and to help drive what I was doing. And I mentioned, it took me a while to work out that I needed personas. Um, so yeah, I'll definitely be using, I guess, the ACLI change capabilities,
Yeah.
but I would be keen for people to come along with their challenges, and then we can sort
Yeah.
of co-create them together,
Yeah.
using some of those tools.
Well, and maybe there's a little bit of showcasing of what you've done, and there's a little bit of working out loud, and
Absolutely.
we have lots of opportunities. We will We will work through it. I think it's going to be incredibly high value activity regardless. Elizabeth Beattie, thank you so much for your generosity in sharing all of this. If people want to connect with you on LinkedIn, that's okay for you? Is that the best place?
Absolutely. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yep,
Yes.
easy to find you, and I'll put that your profile in the show notes as well. But a very big thank you, Elizabeth, from all of us here at the Agile Change Leadership Institute.
Thanks for having me, Jen. I've loved the conversation and I've learned things as well.
It's the way we continue this cycle of lifelong learning. Good stuff.
Exactly.
Thanks.